Hello, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon. This is Jan from Gated Talent here in London. Welcome to this premium webinar. Today's topic is your next career move starts with a great resume. And I am delighted to welcome Pati Kelly, executive recruiter at Egret Consulting Group, which is an established and well-respected recruiting firm for the global electrical industry based in the greater Chicago area. So hello, Pati. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. How are you?
It's fine. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So just to give you a little bit of background, Pati originally joined Egret Consulting Group in 2000, recruiting in the electrical and lighting field, and returned back in 2013 as an executive recruiter for wire and cable. Pati has over 25 years of sales experience, including pharmaceutical sales and account management. She holds a BA in the business administration and marketing and a BS in home economics from Mississippi State University. Pati concentrates on working with wire and cable. Clients range from major manufacturers of industrial and utility products to players in retail and datacom. She specializes in building relationships with our clients to fully understand their needs in order to bring them the right candidates for positions including all levels of sales, operations, plant management, engineering, marketing, and product management. So we're just about to start. Just a reminder, during the presentation, you can use the chat box on the side of your screen at any time to send us questions, and we will have a few minutes to address your questions at the end of this webinar. So Pati, I'm going to make you the presenter now, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So this is a webinar we've decided to create for how to build a great resume and also how to find a recruiter. And again, I'm Pati Kelly, and I work with Egret Consulting. Egret Consulting Group has been in business since 1999. We recruit exclusively in the electrical industry, both on a contingency and retained basis. We recruit in lighting design, power distribution, that would be like switchgear, transformers, automation and controls, electrical wholesale distribution in companies with like Annixter or Graybar, and then the wire and cable manufacturers. I specifically am in the wire and cable segment, and I recruit at all levels, both sales, operations, plant management, engineering, marketing, and product management. According to a study done by Ladders, you have 6 seconds to have a recruiter decide if you're a fit or not for the role that they have. So it's very important that you make a great impression on that 6 seconds. So for your resume, you don't want to waste time on non-essential information that doesn't make you stand out. An example of this would be, for example, on your resume, if you put a skill section and you list on there good communicator, business developer, sales leader. Those are all great accolades, but yet they don't really make you stand out. So you don't want to waste space on your resume with those type of things. What do you want to include in your resume? Well, remember, you have 6 seconds, so you want to make sure that it's concise. So having a 3-page long resume does not make sense. We suggest that you go to 2. You should also start with your name and town and state you live in, and then your contact phone number and email. If you work with a company, let's say that's headquartered in London, but you live in Atlanta, you want to make sure that you have it listed that way. You also want to make sure that you don't use your company's email address or use something unprofessional like drivestoofast@aol.com. Okay. What to include on your resume? First, you want to add 1-sentence description of what your company does underneath your company's name. This 1-sentence description is important because if you're trying to move between industries or you're dealing with HR or private equity firms, they may not know your current company and not sure if you're a good fit. So that description is important. Under your job history section, you want to start with your current role and include the title, the company name, the date, and the location of your position. Dates are really important. You want to make sure that you include them. It's important because we want to make sure that have you been with the company for 6 months or 6 years. And I have had people tell me, well, I don't put dates on my resume because it'll show my age. Well, listen, when you show up for your face-to-face, they're going to know and recognize that you're not 35, that you may be in your 60s. If a company is going to limit their hiring based on your age, then it's their loss, and you need to just let them do that. Here's some examples of companies that I work with and sort of how you would line them up on your resume. Southwire, it's a leading manufacturer of residential, commercial, industrial, utility, electrical wire and cable. Or if you've got a company where you want to put in how much volume they're doing. Alcan is an Atlanta-based $800 million North American producer of and processor of aluminum rod, strip, and cable. You get the gist of kind of what I'm talking about here. Also, what you want to include is under your job titles, you want to answer the following questions. What did you achieve? Did you increase sales? Did you make it more profitable? Did you reduce cost? What are those hard numbers? If you don't have hard numbers and you have percentages, that's fine. For example, if you grew the business from 30 million to 100 million within 5 years, just remember to always put in there what makes you proud of the work that you did there. Did you manage any direct reports? And if so, how many? You want to include that in underneath your job titles. Did you have a P&L or a sales budget, and how much was that? That's the important things that you want to include in your resume. You also want to emphasize keywords in a job posting if there's a specific post that you're trying to go after, and incorporate them into your resume. For example, if they are looking for someone who created sales strategies or managed a P&L, you need to have that on the resume if you have done that. You want to put that in there. It helps, especially with when you're applying online. A lot of times people have the software that will only analyze your resume based on keyword searches. So that's important to put that in there. What else do you want to include is the dates. If you've had several positions within the same company and you've been promoted, you want to list those titles and those responsibility changes. For example, if you came from an inside sales role and you moved your way all the way up to the CEO of a company, those are important. So let's talk about what you do not want to put on your resume. And this may shock some people, but you don't want to put your photo on your resume. You're not an actor. If you want to put a photo out there, you need to add it onto your LinkedIn, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It only needs to be a professional photo on your LinkedIn profile. This is not Facebook. I don't care how big the fish was you caught this weekend or how cute a couple you and your spouse are. It needs to be a professional photo. Also, don't include references available. Again, remember we're looking at that 6 seconds, so don't waste space on things that you don't need necessary. If you are of interest to the company and the recruiter is interested, they're going to ask you for your references, and at that point you can include those in. Don't include age, race, marital status, or hobbies. The only time that you might want to include something like that would be if you had a citizen status. For example, you are a green card holder or a naturalized citizen of the U.S. And only include that if you feel like that's important and the company would require that information. I do have examples where someone is a dual citizen of the UK and the US, and they put that on their resume. That may be important for global companies. Don't be sloppy. Double check your errors and spelling. Have someone else proofread it. Have someone else read it over several times. You would not believe how many times I have seen manger instead of manager and seen that misspelling on key executives' resumes. Don't use the pretty graphics and the section break templates. A simple Word document that can be imported into a database is the best. Save those pretty graphics for a printed resume that you're going to give during the personal interview. Okay, let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn. You do want to set up a LinkedIn profile. This is to include your current employment and past, education, industry. This is where we put in that professional photo and any keywords. This does not have to be a full resume. It can be sort of a sell sheet for you. Recruiters search LinkedIn to find candidates, so a bit of detail does help them to find you. For example, for myself, if I had executive account manager for Egret Consulting from, say, 2015 to 2019, that doesn't tell you much about what I do. But if it said I was an executive recruiter who specializes in the wire and cable industry for Egret Consulting, a boutique recruiting firm in the electrical industry, that tells you more. So you want to think of LinkedIn as more of an online resume. Again, does not have to match your resume, but wants to hit the key highlights of what you've done. And then let's talk a little bit about how do you go about finding a recruiter to work with. Not all recruiters are the same. And so I want to talk about the different types of recruiters that there are. There are staffing agencies. These are the types of recruiters who market candidates to companies. They tend to be focused on the lower positions, for example, accounting, engineering, administrative, and geographical focus, or generalist in the industry. For example, they may be focused on the factory floor and only helping hire hourly employees. Then there's the contingency recruiter. These recruiters only get paid if they place somebody with the company. They typically work on exempt positions, and many recruit from inside sales all the way up to VP sales roles. They also work on mutually committed contracts where there's a deposit being paid by the client or the hiring company to the recruiter for the search. Contingency recruiters have multiple assignments and multiple client relationships. A good recruiter will be well known within their industry, and it's important if you create an introduction, it's always a good strategy there. Then there is retained recruiters. These are recruiters who are paid up front. Whether they find the right person or not, they have a consulting relationship with the client. Almost always they're connected to the CEO, board, or president level. Retained recruiters have fewer direct relationships at the client level, but they typically position themselves well within the industry specialties. They can be industry specialists, or they can be functional specialists. For example, they find CFOs, or they find operations, supply chain, or general counsel. So now let's talk a little bit about how do you go about finding a recruiter. You want to network with your peers to find out if they know any industry-specific recruiters. You want to look on LinkedIn and reach out and search those recruiters in their niche and then connect with them. Use Google search and search, for example, keywords like for me, it would be wiring cable recruiter or electrical recruiter. And then there's also several online resources that you can reach out to. For example, Gated Talent is a online service that allows executives to share their information with top executive recruiters. Pinnacle Society is a organization that represents the best of the best. It has just 85 recruiters. It's an elite group of the highest volume producers in the search and placement in North America. And then Forbes also prints out and puts together a top recruiting firm list it posts every year. Questions that you want to ask a recruiter as you find those is, what industries are they in? Are you geographically focused? Are you a staffing contingency or retained recruiter? And then at what levels do they place? This is important for you to understand if the recruiter can help you now or in the future. What does a recruiter want to know? If a recruiter is in a industry niche, what is your background in that industry? What levels are you interested in? I've had people who have been VP or national sales managers who want to move to a regional sales role due to family situations, or they just want to get away from managing people and they want to be an individual contributor. If location is an option for you, if you're open to any area, or if there's a specific area, for example, the southeast of the United States or the northeast of the United States you'd be willing to look at, you want to let that recruiter know that. The salary range that you're willing to look at and accept if it's offered. This is very important for them to understand and not waste your time giving you positions that are not within your financial means that you would look at. And then also if you have a non-compete that they need to worry about. If there's companies that you cannot work for, you want to make sure that the recruiter knows that. How to build a relationship with a recruiter. Recruiters all love referrals. So if you have referrals for their current assignments, that's a great way to build a relationship. Or if you can suggest some information on industry companies that may be changing their organization, for example, hiring or expanding or just reorganizing. All of this information is of value to the recruiter and helps you build that rapport with them. On the other hand, you can tell them the same kind of information. They can do the same on their side. They can tell you who's hiring, who's not, the reputation that's out there in the industry. And in several cases, I have had people that I have relationships with ask me about companies they're going to go to work for, and I've been able to share what I know about them in the industry. If you're building a relationship, you need to tell them what kind of companies you specifically are targeting. They may have contacts there, or if they're going to go out and help you by marketing you out to the industry, they don't want to double up their efforts. So you want to make sure that they know where you've been. Recruiters are all about developing relationships, so they might not be able to help you right now or immediately, but they may be able to refer you to other career opportunities in the future. So it's always important that you take that recruiter's phone call. You just never know when that's going to be needed. And so that wraps up pretty much my presentation. I know we've got a few questions that were submitted earlier that I'm going to cover. So I'm going to turn that over to you and let me find out what you
Sure.
guys are interested in hearing about.
All right. Thank you very much, Patty, for your presentation. So yes, we received a couple more questions during the presentation as well, and we did receive some in advance. So let's address them in order of arrival. So the first one is, I have both a full-length resume and a one-page executive branding profile with pictures, visuals, and recommendations. When to use each?
So we talked a little bit about that already, but the full resume you always want to send out first. That gives the full picture of who you are, and so they can understand where you fit into their organization. So always send that out first. You can send that secondary at the same time if that's important to you. I would say that you can use the secondary with the visuals on your LinkedIn profile. Or if you are following up with a company, to just touch base and say, hey, remember I talked to you last week. Here's a thumbnail sketch of what I've done in the past. So.
Okay, great. Next, we have a question about fonts. I hear that Arial and New Times Roman are outdated fonts. What font and font size would you recommend for an executive resume?
So I disagree with that. I don't think that anybody is going to turn away a good candidate based on the font size or time. Just make sure that it's a font that is able to be read clearly, and also it is large enough to read. We don't want a really long resume with a lot of fine print because it makes it difficult to read when you're scanning resumes and you get hundreds of them. You want to be able to read them pretty quickly, and you don't want someone to miss a detail or just get frustrated and not even read your full resume. So I would say make sure that it's 10 or 12. 8 would be the smallest that I would say recommend on the font size. And then, like I said, Times or Arial or any other choices that's clear and printable. A lot of times recruiters specifically are sucking those into a database. So the more basic it is, the easier it is for the database to pull that information in to hold for them to search for later. All right.
Sure. Okay. Next question. In your experience, can a resume be the make or break of an executive career opportunity?
Yes, your resume can do that. And here's, as I mentioned, some of the things that are become frustrated is when you're receiving so many resumes at one time for a position, and you're having to skim to the third and fourth page to even get into what they accomplished or that they did accomplish things at their current career. um, you sometimes recruiters will just bypass that person. um, if you have misspellings or your grammar is incorrect, and I'm looking at you for a VP of sales position or a CEO who's going to be making presentations to board members or private equity firms, I have some concerns there. If you aren't willing to make sure your resume, which is your selling sheet or your selling presentation of yourself, if you're not willing to take the time to make sure that that's professional, then I'm not going to want to present you to one of my clients based on that. So I've had examples, as I said, where they did not put any information together, and it was just a real was a VP of sales, was a CEO, didn't tell me anything, and I had to make a phone call to make sure that that person was the right candidate. And once I talked to him, I realized he was a great candidate, but because I didn't have the sell sheet or the resume in front of me to be able to really present him, we had to go back and take time to go through building a resume for him because he had never done one, had been with the company for 20 years and had never had to build out a resume. So I definitely think that resumes can make or break a client candidate to a client, or even for a recruiter to present them because they won't take the time to even get to know them sometimes. Okay, so really important.
Okay, great. Next question. Do I need to add career objectives to my resume?
That's a great question. Again, we talk about you've got 6 seconds to make a recruiter or someone, an HR manager, want to pick up the phone and talk to you. So I would say those are not that important career objectives. I think what you might want to put in the front is almost like an elevator speech of speaking to, why am I the person that you should talk to? What are my accomplishments that I have achieved? Um, Career objectives tend to be more seen on the lower levels of someone who's just graduated from college. Um, but I also see on career objectives things like go to work for a great company and be a sales leader in the industry. That doesn't tell me very much. So I always think it's much better to put in there, I've accomplished this and this is why you need to talk to me. So think of it in that terms more so than a career objective.
Yes, I agree. I think the elevator pitch you described is probably the best option there.
Exactly.
Um, okay, next question we've received. Okay, interesting one. I assume recruiters receive several hundred emails and resumes per day. How does the candidate get noticed?
I think you do based on reaching out and making sure that that resume has a good indication of what you've achieved in your career and how you're valid for whatever. If you're applying for a position specifically, I would just make sure that I highlighted how I matched that specific position with the recruiter. If you are just reaching out to build a rapport with a recruiter, that's okay too. Um, but let them know that I'm currently working, I'm happy, I'm where I'm at, but I would like to move to the next step. And my next step would be ABC, National Sales Manager, CEO, VP of Sales, whatever that title is. And so that way the recruiter knows, hey, this is somebody I should keep in the back of my mind. There are a lot of times when recruiters, at least in our industry, and what we see is who keep people in mind for opportunities. And then when they come, those are the first people that I call. Because I know them, I know what they're looking for, I know their personalities, I know what kind of company culture they're looking for, and this company is asking me for that type of person. So um, I always think though it's best to make sure you reach out directly to them.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, next we have, we touched on this before. What is an acceptable length of a resume? But with this comment, with 20 years or more experience, it is difficult to fit everything on 1 or 2 pages. So how do you go to the meat of the experience, if I can say?
And that's a great question. So, what I always tell people to do is if you can limit it to 2 pages, and on the second page, list if you haven't been in those positions in 20 years, just list the titles and the companies and the dates that you were there. You don't have to have much detail. The detail should be closer to the more current position. So that's what you should use the space for. So, for example, if you were an inside salesperson for a company or a warehouse operator for a company in 1980, you could just put, either put that title with the company name, or I've also seen some people have put previous positions held at such and such a list of companies that they've worked for, so that they can always come back to that. It's much better to do it that way than to leave it completely blank. So I will have come so when I look at somebody's resume and it says they graduated in 1982 from college, let's say, and then the first position that they ever had was in 1996. I'm like, okay, fill in these dates. What happened? Were you in jail? Were you in the military? Were you in a coma in the hospital? What was going on there? And so that way I understand where they have been, because I do have companies who come back to me and go, okay, so he graduated from college, then what did he do? So you don't need to put every single little 6-month job in there, but a general, if you were there, how you got to where you are, basically up to that most current, say 15 years ago level. Does that make sense?
I think it does.
Okay.
Okay, that's great. We just have time for one more and final question.
Okay.
Can search firms help candidates to improve their resumes? And slash or would you recommend using a professional resume writer?
I I think both things are true. Recruiters aren't in the resume writing business. That's not what they do, and that's not basically what we get paid for. So I think that using a professional service is a great idea. I don't see any problems with those type of things, but make sure that you're, again, following some of those rules we talked about. A lot of times I've seen the professional writing service places want to use pretty graphics and well, that's beautiful when you're having a printed resume, but for somebody to as I said, bring it into a database, which most recruiters are using some kind of database system, it's gonna screw it up, and it's not gonna have your information brought in correctly, and the recruiter's going to have to go back in and fix it, basically, is what I'm trying to tell you. So I think that you need to make sure that if you're using a professional service, that you're doing two different kinds of resumes, one to be sent out to a recruiter and then and put into a database, and then one to be a professional, here's what it looks like, here's a printed position resume. But some recruiters like myself, I've always said, yes, send me your resume. I'll take a look at it and I'll review it. If I see anything that's really blatantly obvious that you need to fix, I will definitely try to help people out, just because that's the type of person I am. I always like to help people. I think pay it forward. But I know there are some recruiters in the industry who won't take the time to do that. They will just, they don't have time in their lives to do that. So does that make sense? I would say definitely try to use the professional writing services. They're better at that than recruiters who are trying to basically fill positions. Remember, that's their focus.
Absolutely. And for people on the call, we partner with Tim Windorf, who is a professional executive resume writer and one of the few executive resume masters in the world.
Awesome.
I think there's only 30 who have this qualification worldwide. So you can check in our archive of premium webinars to find some webinars he did for us as well. And before we go, I just received a final question. I think this one can be answered very quickly. I know the answer, but I will let you answer, Pati. Should a resume be written in Word or in PDF format?
I would say Word, because again, we're talking about bringing resumes into databases, and you can't do that with PDF files as easily. So
Exactly. For me, that in my experience, some resume parsing services will accept PDFs, but not all of them. So it's always better to go for the safe option and go for Word, indeed.
exactly.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you so much, Pati, for your time today. I think it was very interesting and
And
informative.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. So thanks everybody for joining us on the call, and we'll see you again soon for another premium webinar. For now, goodbye and thank you. Goodbye, Pati. Speak to you soon.